Welcome to another DCS tutorial for the Hornet, and today we're going to be looking at the Maverick F. I'm going to show three methods how you can employ this weapon as quickly and effectively as possible. The ability to fire quickly is of course hugely important, especially with a relatively short range missile like the Maverick. If you can fire all four in a single pass, you limit your exposure to both SAM defences and of course fighter interception. Now, I don't find the Hornet a particularly effective air-to-ground platform, with the exception of long-range standoff munitions of course. However, it is pretty good when it comes to Mavericks, at least against static targets. So, let's jump in the cockpit and take a look. Okay, here we are on board, and we're carrying 4 Mavericks today, along with the AT Flare. And in this first method, we're going to be attacking static targets. We're going to start by getting rid of the stick and the moving map, and designating waypoint 2 as our target, as I know that we have some Scud launchers in that area. I'm now going to bring up the pod on the right MFD and put it into IR mode, and then sensor select right to make it soy. If we zoom in, we can see 5 dots, which are our Scuds. So I'll sensor select right again to go into C mode so we can slew, and then TDC action to ground stabilize. Now let's select the Mavs on the left MFD and bring up the iMav display. We're now going to set the field of view to narrow and then press step. And once that's done, we're going to repeat that for all 4 stations. Once complete, I like to step through each station again, just to confirm. Now we need to use a TDC to slew onto target, and once we're happy, press TDC action to lock in our coordinates. Now we're going to create a mark point, in this case mark point 1. We have 4 Mavericks, so we just need to repeat that for 3 more targets, creating mark points 2, 3 and 4. Now we need to change our currently selected waypoint from waypoint 2 and select mark point 1. In the Hornet there are 10 mark points and they are stored prior to waypoint 1. So we need to press PB8 on the HSI or the SA page to get to waypoint 1, and then continue downwards to mark point 10 and then all the way down to mark point 1. Once there, we can hit designate and our T-pod will slew to the target. You can now press sensor select left to make the Maverick the soy, and as soon as the seeker locks, the crosshairs will close and we can fire. There's the lock. And rifle. Let's just pause there, as the following are the key steps to fire the remaining missiles quickly. What we're going to do is press push button 12 on the AMPCD to change to mark point 2. Then press push button 14 to designate. The Maverick will slew to the second target and it should lock immediately if you're targeted correctly. Then you can fire and repeat until all 4 Mavericks are off the rails. If the Maverick doesn't lock immediately, then I'll cover that in the next section. So let's carry on. So that's all 4 away in around 10 seconds and just under a mile travelled. And we're still safely outside the engagement zone of most short-range SAMs. You might get into the range of an SA-15 if you struggle to get an early lock. Even if you do get fired on, there should be little difficulty in dragging an SA-15 missile. We're chasing the last Maverick fired, and we can see 2 of the other 3 missiles fired and are catching them up, and often we'll overtake them. This is because the Maverick is relatively slow flying and the launch aircraft is often faster than the missile for most of its flight. And shack. This is all good when it works. However, the Hornet's T-pod is pretty terrible. Some pods in DCS can identify a manpad at 50 miles, however, in the Hornet you have no chance. And even reliably targeting a vehicle beyond 30 miles can be tricky. This means that you might find that your T-pod, and thus your Maverick, is not quite looking at your target, and you won't get a lock using this method, so we need to be prepared. I use 2 methods to overcome this. The first is to create additional mark points, which is fine if you have other potential targets in the area. However, if you don't, then you'll need to use manual targeting. Here I have the same 5 launchers and I've set mark points for all 5. But I've deliberately set mark point 4 to be slightly off target, which is very easy to do if trying to do so from long range. So that's 3 missiles away and the 4th hasn't locked as predicted. So let's take a quick pause. What we're going to do is press push button 11 to undesignate the target, and that will allow us to manually slew the Maverick Seeker using the TDC. And this can work well, however it takes a little skill and can go wrong, as sometimes it's a struggle to acquire the target, or you might even lock the wrong vehicle. I'm going to attempt this method, however once I get a lock I won't fire. Instead, I'll then use the alternate method, which is typically much easier, and that is simply to switch to mark point 5, which I set up as a reserve. I'm now going to unpause, undesignate the target, slew the TDC, and we have a lock. I can now fire, but instead we'll change to mark point 5 and rifle. I'd suggest that knowing what to do when things go wrong is actually more important than knowing the initial procedure, so I would definitely recommend thinking about and practicing your backup plans. The next method we're going to look at is probably more suitable for moving targets where mark points are of little use. That said, it is usually worth creating a mark point in the approximate area in case you accidentally lose the target. Here though, we're going to primarily rely on the T-pod to track the targets and slave the Maverick. I'm just setting my Maverick fields of view to narrow as I did previously, and now we can bring up the T-pod, set it to IR mode, make it soy, and then we can zoom in and if we sensor select right to change to scene mode, we can now slew around and find our targets. As we slew around, you can see that the Maverick Seeker will follow the T-pod, but it does have a slight delay. If we were in range, we could place the T-pod on the target, make the Maverick soy, and it would try and get a lock. However, at this range, it's not going to happen. So instead, we're going to try to get a moving lock with the T-pod by putting it on target and pressing sensor select right. And now we have a lock. But if you look closely at the Maverick display, you will see that it's moved the target but is not tracking, and the vehicles are now moving out of the lock zone. So let's take a little pause. With this method, we have the T-pod locked but the Maverick not moving. However, if you make the T-pod soy and then immediately make the Maverick soy again, then cage and uncage the Maverick, it will go back to the new T-pod location and try to lock once again. Now, this might seem like a convoluted method, however, it literally takes 1 second to do, and no brain power. You can carry on flying the plane, looking at your radar warning receiver, maintain formation, or whatever. And each time you do those 4 actions, you just need to take a quick peek at your map display to see if you've got a track. We're currently at 15.5 miles, so I like to do the occasional refresh at this range, but once we get down to around 10 miles, then I will keep repeating frequently until I can see that the Maverick has a track. So let's unpause. I'm going to refresh now. No track yet. And refresh again. Still no track. Down to 10 miles, so try again. And we have a lock. So I'm going to pause again there and explain the next steps. Now that we know that we're in range, we don't want to use this method anymore, and we're going to have to go heads down from now on, irrespective. What we're going to do then is fire the missile and make the T-pod soy and put it into scene mode. Slew the T-pod to the target, then make the Maverick soy, and hopefully it will lock the target. If not, we can try to either go back to the T-pod and try again, as sometimes the Maverick might not align or even lock the wrong target, or we can cage and uncage the Maverick. So let's carry on and see how we do. This time it's not aligned, so we're going to sensor across the T-pod and back. And that's still not worked, so cage and uncage and lock. And we're 5.8 miles out, so we can break away and we should be safe from the majority of SHORAD SAMs still. From the first launch to the last was 28 seconds and we covered 3.4 nautical miles, doing around 400 knots. Just wait for the missiles to hit. And shack 1, 2, 3 and 4. All 4 targets destroyed. Now, the final method we're going to use is to control the Maverick seeker directly. This is far faster than the previous method, but it has some significant downsides. First of all, it's a lot harder to do and need practice, as it can easily go wrong. Secondly, you need to fly your aircraft straight towards a target, which is far from ideal, especially when heads down. And finally, it's almost impossible to select specific targets due to the magnification being so low. We're currently ingressing at 17 miles, and I am going to start off by getting a moving lock with the T-pod. That's now locked up okay. So the reason we need to be pointing directly towards the target is that when you swap Mavericks, they start caged, and when we start firing, we won't have a target point. So we need the caged Maverick to be pointing at the target so we can find it and lock it up. What I'm doing now is caging and uncaging the Maverick to check that when it's caged, it's pointing towards my targets. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to be in the field of view. That's looking good, and we're approaching 11 miles, so I'm going to designate the T-pod. I can now depress the TDC and slew the Maverick manually, but it's not ground stabilised, so this is where a little skill is required and where it can go horribly wrong. Once I get a lock, I will fire immediately, and because the next Maverick should be pointing in the right direction, we should be able to quickly lock up another target. That's 4 away in just over 10 seconds, and we're at 7.8 miles from the target still, which is pretty good. But again, I have to stress that this can go very wrong, especially if you don't carry on flying in a straight line. But you could mitigate that by using the autopilot. There is actually a fourth method which is similar to this one, but even faster, and has several other important benefits, such as ground stabilisation and the ability to move the Maverick away from the target point so you don't have to fly towards the enemy. However, that requires an upgrade to the standard Hornet, which is called the Harrier. So once again, thank you for watching. Hopefully you've learned something useful today, and if so, please do hit like and subscribe. Thank you.